I always talk about New York City in that moment. The convergence of all the arts was ripe because the city was kind of downtrodden. And when you have an atmosphere or a place, all these things, they bubble up in all the different arts. You know, people aren't aware that there were 4 factories. I was part of the last 2 factories. So the factories that the people are most aware of are the first 2 factories, which is the talent that emerged were people like Lou Reed, Ultraviolet, Billy Name. These people were part of the first factory. And those first 2 factories sort of stopped after Andy got shot.
Right.
And that's when he became a different artist.
Yeah.
And his brain worked differently. I don't know if getting shot or having a traumatic thing in your life changes the art brain.
That's a very good point because there is no doubt that trauma like that would produce a post-traumatic stress consequence. I'm an expert in PTSD and stress and the brain, and I've developed methods to train people who have PTSD or developmental stress or stressed out relationships to recruit their creativity and rewire their brains so they're not hostages of the phantom stress of the past. They are able to create a new story that their bodies live in beyond the trauma. And Andy, I mean, literally, one of his doctors said, you should go see Phil. He's an expert in stress. And we were talking at a dinner one evening at BAM, I think. And he said, oh yeah, such and such a person said I should come and see you for my stress. But I tell you, in the 50s, I flunked out of psychoanalysis. I don't think it's going to help me at this point. Right. I think making art is the best thing for me. And I said, you are absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, I always agreed, like people that don't have any issues don't really make good artists.
No.
Yeah, you know what I mean? You have to have issues. You need something to work off of. Well, and if you're free as an artist, there's nothing to work off of.
That's right.
You know, and
so what you're identifying, which is the sort of yin-yang of creativity, is adversity. Creativity is in the genome. Our cells create and have mechanisms to survive. They survive the adversity of the environment, the adversity between others, and the adversity within themselves. So creativity is a way to get beyond adversity and reframe your experience, create a new reality, and then make a life in it.
So would you say that everybody's born with this creativity genome?
Yes.
And it's just a question of how we deal with it?
That's right. That's right. When we look at the brain from, we're trying to understand creativity, we know that the brain, when it's doing things, is in the doing brain. Accounting, business, paying your taxes, you know, all this stuff. The brain is designed to do things. It's linear. It's trying to do it quickly, trying to do it well. So that doing brain consumes most of our time and drives most of culture. But then there are some people who are really bad at doing things. They're disorganized, they can't get it done. And they spend more time in a brain state called divergent cognition, or the being brain. Daydreaming, just wandering around, non-linear thinking. And when they're in that state, the brain isn't looking outside and trying to make sense of things. It's turned into itself. And different centers in the brain, we call them association centers, start chattering with each other. Memory, emotion, thinking, imagination, pain, excitement, all this stuff. And it is in this state that new ideas pop up to solve problems.
And how do you think that people like Andy were able to manage with the linear part? In other words, I've got to make money so I can pay the rent, to pay the people that do Interview Magazine. How do those two things coincide with the creative side of anybody?
This is why Andy is so unique and so incredibly talented. We know that ordinary, problem solving and whatnot and executing things the brain toggles back and forth between imagination and execution. When you look at Andy's developmental history, it is significant with adversity. Medical adversity as a child, brain infection, seizures, social isolation because he couldn't go to school because of his what's called St. Vitus dance. It's a result of a bacterial infection. Fortunately, and this is the critical piece, his mother was a doting, creative environment. She was an artist herself, and she had a very tough childhood. So she devoted her life to nurturing and protecting, and I say Andy's first creative studio was with his mom.
Would you think that some artists have more of this creative gene in them than others? In other words, how do you conflate people like Frank Stella, Bob Rauschenberg, Joseph Beuys? In other words, some of them, I don't know all of them, but I mean, they didn't have as much adversity in them. So maybe they didn't, I mean, to this day, everybody knows the name Warhol.
Right.
But not everybody knows Rauschenberg, Lichtenstein, Joseph Beuys. And is it because Andy had more adversity in his life, so he did more?
I think you're right about that. I do think Andy had enormous adversity. And he had resilience. This is the other component of creative intelligence. We also all have the resilience to bounce back, some better than others. But the thing you're talking about is talent, and we know that's a genetic loading, just like intelligence or anything else. So some people are more talented to solve problems with their creativity and then execute it, which is where I think Andy was quite brilliant in moving from the creative to the executive, and I think he liked being an executive. He liked being a businessman.
Yeah, he did.
It gave him a real sense of power and meaning. And then he also, I mean, as many times as I was around him, he always seemed to be daydreaming.
You know, that's why they always talk about, did Andy ever smile or did he ever talk? Because in a lot of the early interviews, he would just say yes, no.
Right.
He wouldn't expand on a question. He was, I mean, they call it the strong silent type.
Right.
And that would be his story. I mean, but when you look at his body of work, when he was working on his piss paintings, which became oxidation paintings, or the Rorschach paintings, which are so absolutely simple, but are so interpretive. Like, you know, how simple is it to just fold a piece of paper, and in his case, fold a canvas, put ink down, and make these paintings.